right, and we are live, sir.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Good evening, everybody. My name is William Lutz. I'm president of City Council, and welcome to the June 8th work session to be followed by committee meetings. We have two items on the agenda this evening. First is a presentation from U.S. Fish and Wildlife on dam removal, and second is a potential discussion on a potential resolution encouraging the governor and health director to open up the state economy a little more. I will say these are a little weird circumstances for me. I may have to pop off of here. We lost power where I'm at, and I'm on my cell phone, and I don't have a lot of battery power left. So if I fall off, if Mr. Phillips is on, he can quarterback the rest of this process. So with that, I can't really tell who's on and who's not. Patrick, do we have somebody from Fish and Wildlife on, or one of those parties to make the presentation?
I see R3D Knight iPhone on here. I'm going to unmute you, Donnie.
Mayor, this is David Heilman with Flatland Resources. We were the consulting firm hired for this project, and we'll be giving the presentation in coordination with Donnie.
Yep, but I am on, Patrick, and Dave, when you get to my section, I think I can go ahead and do that portion for the WRSP.
Okay, sounds good. Patrick, if we do have a PowerPoint presentation, and was hoping you'd be able to give me host capabilities so I can share that presentation with everyone.
All right, you're on.
Okay, so hello again, and thank you for giving us the ability to kind of explain in detail this project. And the way we have this set up is that I'll run through this presentation. It talks about the dam removal feasibility study that Flatland Resources was hired to complete, and then we will do questions at the end. I ask if you're able to submit questions to Tyler Frudenthal, who's in the chat, or to me, and then we'll be able to kind of read those questions off and answer them as we go. So with that being said, Flatland Resources, we are based out of Muncie, Indiana, a small community about an hour and a half from Troy. So as we know, rivers are a source of life for all species. Without water, there wouldn't be the world as we know it. There wouldn't be us. Humans, above all else, have mastered rivers to suit our needs. We use them for transportation, to transport goods and ourselves all across the nation, all across the world. And have modified them to make that transportation easier. We also use rivers for irrigation purposes, to water our fields, our produce, and our livestock, and have done an excellent job, sometimes to the detriment of the ecosystems, in creating river systems that look more like road maps than rivers themselves. We've used created power mills and other devices to harness the water's energy to produce electricity and create grist mills. But not all of our utilization of rivers is good. We have used it to carry away our waste, our refuse, our industrial pollution, which has led to some severe ecological and health tragedies in our history. So as you can probably see on the picture on your screen, this is the Cuyahoga River, one that infamously caught fire in Cleveland And I'm sure many of you have heard about some of the cholera outbreaks and what Chicago tried to do to get rid of the waste that was building up in their water supply. And at the center of all these innovations and utilizations of the river is the dam. The US saw an explosion of dams built especially between 1900 and 1950 to allow us to master the water. In fact, there are 91,000 dams in the United States, most of them in the central part of the United States and in the southeastern portion of the United States as well. A majority of these dams, or I should say about 8,000 of these dams, are over 90 years old, which fits within kind of that time frame where we saw the explosion of dams. And about 1 in 6 dams pose a safety hazard, not only to the economy, local economies, but to millions of American lives. With significant decrease in factories and manufacturing, as you can see in these two charts, total manufacturing as a percentage of GDP has been dropping significantly since the early 1950s. So has the percentage of manufacturing jobs in the United States. This, along with a desire to clean up our rivers via the Clean Water Act and a general desire for people to be down by the river, has led many communities across the United States to reconsider whether or not they actually need their low-head dams. So, with that in mind, why do we want to remove dams? And we've kind of boiled it down to 4 reasons. The first reason is the ecological impacts that dams have on watersheds and river systems, riverine systems. Dams destroy and disconnect ecosystems. Silting and shallow water eliminates habitats necessary for fish, mussels, and other aquatic species to live. As you see on the graphic on your page, water that's usually trapped behind a dam within the backwater pool is usually shallower, therefore it's warmer, and it eliminates significant amounts of habitats and aquatic species that you would typically see in a healthy riverine system. Another reason why communities are moving towards removal of dams is safety. Low-head dams are drowning machines. There's no other way to describe them. Every year we hear stories about people of all ages, from the kids to the elderly, that get caught in the dangerous currents of low-head dams and end up drowning. With many of these dams no longer serving their intended function, as we talked about previously, removing these dams is extremely important, as they pose a liability to the lives of those citizens of the city, as well as a financial liability to the owners of the dams. And as cities look to attract families to their downtown areas, where most dams are located, it becomes even more important to increase the safety for those young families. Another reason for dam removal are the increased recreational and economic opportunities. Paddle sports are becoming ever increasingly popular across the United States and have been on an upward trajectory for the last 40 or so years. As cities and states have worked to clean up the rivers, people have flocked to them to canoe, kayak, fish, etc. In 2017, the outdoor rec industry, which includes canoeing, kayaking, fishing, and associated industries that provide those, or the manufacturers of those canoes and kayaks, restaurant and hotel industry centered around outdoor recreation. That was valued at $427 billion across the United States. And that in itself was a 10% increase from 2012. So there are more and more people that are outside canoeing and kayaking. And from all indications, those trends appear to be continued in the upward direction. And the final reason for dam removal that we've kind of put together is maintenance. Dams, like other structures and cars, so on, have to be maintained in order. And as time goes on and as the dams get older, the cost of this maintenance goes up. And I know Troy is very familiar with this, as you guys rebuilt your dam just a few years ago. So again, the main reasons for dam removal are ecological, safety hazard to river users, recreational, or say increased recreational and economic opportunities, and they are financial liabilities due to their maintenance cost. So this gets us to this project where we are today. So as I said, Flatland Resources was hired to do a feasibility study on what it would take and what it would look like to remove the Lowhead Dam in Troy, Ohio. The first part of this project, the first thing we did was we reached out to the public for comment. We wanted to understand what you, the community, knew about the dam and about the Great Miami River, and what you valued most about the river, and what you considered most important for the community. So we took all this data, compiled it, and it created these interesting little charts that told us what you guys mentioned most, what you cared about most. One of those things that kept popping up was recreational opportunities, fishing, boating, kayaking, canoeing. And most of all, we heard from multiple citizens through these surveys and through conversations we had during the meetings and after meetings that you guys wanted the dams removed. So with that, with recreation, as you guys know, or may have known, recreation will come once the dam is removed. More kayakers, more canoers will show up on the river to recreate in it. The picture you see on the screen is from a dam removal project we worked on here in Muncie, Indiana. The dam was in the far right corner of your screen, should show up as the red line now. Dam was removed last fall, and I took this picture a few weeks ago where once kayakers were very rare. You can see 3 kayakers, I believe, in this picture. What you don't see outside of the screen is another group of 6 kayakers. There's people using the trail. There's fishermen and little kids that are down by the water's edge throwing rocks into the water. One concern that we did hear that we wanted to address was that the river will dry up when you remove the dam. So I have kind of a photo montage to show you guys. This is of another dam removal project that we did in Muncie, Indiana. This dam was 8 feet tall. This is a before photo that I took during, albeit a little higher, of just after a minor flood that we had. And then this is a rendering that we created for the project, again, for a similar type of public meeting that we are holding tonight. Again, showing what the conditions could look like after the dam is removed. And then this photo was taken just this year at the same location. Again, with the red line showing where the dam was. As you can see, it's been a relatively dry spring. We've had a couple larger storms, but even with the dam removed, there's still water flowing through the river. Another thing that we heard a lot from concerned citizens and through the public input process was the desire to be able to fish more and to improve the the ecological quality of the river. Once the dam is removed, you will begin to restore the natural systems that the river system is a part of. You begin to reconnect water flow, wetland storage systems, etc. These pictures that were taken on the Stillwater Creek in Ohio after that dam was removed. And as you can see, the ecological systems, the biodiversity returned with a vengeance, and again has made the Stillwater Creek dam removal project kind of the perfect example of how Mother Nature bounces back after a dam removal. Another key component to this project, this feasibility study, that we had to go through and understand is the understanding what heavy metals and PCBs could be trapped in the sediment behind the dam. The concern being that if we remove the dam and as that sediment begins to wash downstream slowly, that if someone were to come in contact with that sediment, that there could be harm. So we did a study based upon the EPA's regional screening levels and the heavy metals and PCBs that they look for and concerned about, and compared that to residential soil levels, essentially meaning in a residential setting, if a person came into contact with the heavy metal or PCB, would they be harmed? We sent this information off to the Ohio EPA and received this email back, essentially saying that they do not anticipate any human health concerns with someone coming in contact with the sediment. So with that in mind, we knew that if public opinion and talking with city officials and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Miami Conservancy District, that all those groups and organizations were in support of the project, that it could go ahead. And that's what we are recommending today, based on these conversations with the public, with these officials, and with the Ohio EPA, that the Lowhead Dam in Troy be removed. So, all that to say, the dam removal itself and the associated improvements along the Great Miami River need to complement the other projects that the city is doing along the riverfront, which includes public gathering spaces and expanding the trail system throughout the town. What you see on your screen now is an overall plan view of what the river could look like after the dam is removed. As you can see, the river is much narrower through town all the way up to Treasure Island, and we will talk about that in greater detail here in a minute. We also are proposing and extending the trail system along the southwest side of the river, running down from approximately the existing dam location up to Treasure Island. The image on your screen is of Treasure Island, and it is rotated so that north is to your left. In talking with city officials and with citizens of Troy, there was a desire or a concern of, if the dam is removed, what would happen to Treasure Island? And it's true that if a dam is removed, typically the water levels will decrease. And in order to prevent anything that would negatively affect the functions of Treasure Islands, we are proposing an in-stream structure, which would most likely be a W-weir, although the exact in-stream structure will be worked out during the design phase of the project. And what these structures do is they help maintain a water elevation upstream of the structure, while also allowing for easy recreational passage and fish passage upstream of the structure. So by installing this structure, we're able to maintain the current water level elevation so that Treasure Island can continue to operate at its current day level, capacity, and functions. This is a rendering kind of showing that a W-weir structure. It's a little diagrammatic in how it works. It's made of typically of boulders or blast rock that are sized to withstand the velocity of water when the river floods. The size of these boulders will be fleshed out during the design phase of this project. Again, here you get a good idea of the ability to canoe or kayak through the structure, while also creating some unique and interesting spaces to get closer to the water. And here is another rendering of what that W-weir structure could look like in its relationship with Treasure Island. Because the river it will narrow up without the dam in place, there is room to extend a trail along the southwest bank, or would be the right bank of the river. This cross section here is shown just north of Adams Street, and it shows again that a bankful bench would be built, and there's a possibility to build a trail along that section, again creating more connectivity and more ability for people to access the river and the water. The image you see here on your screen is a blow-up plan of the existing dam location. Again, it is oriented with north to your left. We want to make clear that currently the plan is not to remove the entire dam. The portion of the dam to be removed is about 200 feet wide. And this is the width of what's called the bankful bench. And a bankful bench, or the bankful width, is kind of the elevation point and the width of the river at which you first start to see flooding. So generally, this is like a storm you would see every 2 to 2.5 years. But in this area for the Great Miami River, we would be removing about 200 feet of the dam. What is left and what remains of the dam would be cut in such a way that it's safe, that people can't get hurt, and so on. So these are a couple cross sections that kind of show what this could potentially look at. In these cross sections, we are standing upstream of the dam, looking downstream, looking to the southeast. So on the top is current day conditions, and in the bottom is proposed conditions. Again, showing the ability to create a trail on the right bank, or the western side of the river.
South side of the river.
Yes, thank you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. You're going to discuss kind of the next steps and the funding for this project.
Great. Dave, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. I'm Donnie Knight. I work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I think I know quite a few people on here, but there may be some folks that don't know me. I'm the biologist for Fish and Wildlife Service that covers this area, this watershed, and have been in these discussions, I guess, close to 6 years maybe now. So what you see on the screen, and there will be additional maps that we're going to go through, are all of the projects that we put into a nomination through Ohio EPA for the WRSP program, which in a very brief description of that program, the OEPA has wastewater and drinking water infrastructure loans that go out to cities and wastewater districts, what have you. The interest off of those loans go back into a pot of money that can be competitively accept grants or nominations to do restoration in the watershed. So we as of August 31st last year, we submitted the nomination for the projects you'll see on the maps here, and we were awarded $4 million for both the Troy and Piqua dam removal and restoration projects, as well as a few others. So the two that we have on the screen right now you're looking at is the section on the left, the map on the left, the Troy low dam areas, what Dave has just presented on. And the area to the right is also in Troy, and that is the old Oxbow. So that's the original channel that if you've golfed at Miami Shores, that is Miami Shores, and you see that long Oxbow winding around the golf course. Part of this nomination is we're going to reconnect that Oxbow. It's not changing the current location of the river. It's just connecting that on the upper end. It's got a connection on the bike path on the south end of that Oxbow, the smaller polygon on the right map. And on the larger polygon to the north, that's the earthen berm that creates an accessible roadway to the Miami Shores golf course. So the portion of this project for that would be to have modeling done, and we would reopen the ground underneath the road so floodwaters can make it into the Oxbow, where right now it's cut off until I think close to a 15-foot event, which flood stage for this area is 14 feet. So it'll increase the ability for those floodwaters to make it through Troy and reduce energy and also provide fish and wildlife benefits as well as water quality. Go ahead, Dave. Okay, the next maps here are the Piqua project. We held the public forum, this fourth and final public forum last week for Piqua, and the map to the left is a small sheet pile dam that the city still uses as part of their drinking water. So there is a water intake just above that small sheet piling dam. Because that's still being utilized, we would propose to not remove that, to maintain that pool elevation, and will essentially create a rock riffle that allows for fish passage as well as safer recreation as paddlers are going down through that structure. On the right, we have the downtown Piqua section. So the red dot indicates the old electric gate dam. That gate dam is no longer used for cooling waters. So the plan is to do much like Troy. We would remove most of that structure, and they would have in-stream habitat work like Dave showed up to Loch 9 Park, which is the north end of that green polygon. Go ahead, Dave. And the other two projects, one on the left, that's where you see the baseball fields, that's Duke Park. The green polygon indicates that's where you drop down into the floodplain, and we are currently working on what's called an off-channel or bank-full wetland. So we have about a 14-acre area indicated in that field, that the field itself and that polygon is about 40 acres. 14 of those acres are going to be excavated out to a average depth of 6 feet. And then we'll also have overwintering fish habitat holes. And essentially the critical elevation is that we'll connect that wetland to is based off of when the stream bed load starts to move. and you get scouring in the bed load, which resets your macroinvertebrate populations because the gravel's getting tossed around and mobilized. It's also going to help protect cities and communities downstream because it will give a new basin for floodwaters to enter in, and it's going to reduce not only the amount of water coming down the river, but also the energy and the speed that water is coming down. And then the area to the right is in Tip City. That road is 571 Bridge, and that's another off-channel wetland that we're looking at doing through this WRSP. So, and I do want to make mention that these are two kind of pilot projects for this restoration type, but they've been getting a lot of attention from various agencies, municipalities. There's examples of this restoration that has alleviated flooding in communities that were really getting ravaged by flooding in this last 10 years, where we're experiencing probably some of our wettest, highest river events in a 10-year period. So go ahead, Dave. So with that, before I switch it back over to Dave and we'll go through some questions, like I said, we have $4 million right now we're nominated for. And basically what we would do in the next 2 years is we would work towards final design plans to enable us to start looking at seeing these projects to completion. And one key aspect for both the Troy and Piqua projects is the restorations that techniques that we've presented. We also presented to the Miami Conservancy District, since both in Troy and Piqua, the dams are owned by the cities, but all of the area along the river is owned and operated by the Miami Conservancy District. And we have presented these renderings and what we've presented to you in these studies. And the Miami Conservancy District has agreed that it'll actually not only benefit the communities and the fish and wildlife that we've described, but it'll also provide additional protection to the levee system in those stretches of river. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Dave or Tyler, and we can start working through some questions.
Thanks, Donnie. So before I get to questions, I wanted to mention one more thing real quick. Another consulting firm called Arcadis was hired to do a study to see if removing the dam would affect the ability for the water wells that are located along the east side of the river to draw water based on the change in hydraulics. They ran their model, and removing the dam would not affect their ability the water wells to intake water, which provides the majority of the water for the city. So just wanted to mention that as well. So now with regards to the questions, first question we got is, will we be able to replicate water levels we have today with gently sloping features, boulders? So the answer to that is that there will be possibly at least one in-stream structure, W-weir, near Treasure Island, possibly more, depending on the slope of the river and the ability for fish to kind of move upstream. So it's possible that there may need to be 2 W-weirs installed. And again, that is something that would be worked out during the design phase of the project. However, both of those structures would be relocated relatively close to Treasure Island. So downstream of those structures onto the dam and past the Oxbow, it would be a free-flowing river. The next question that I got is, why is it important to do away with the dam? As we talked about in the presentation, there are four main reasons why communities are pursuing dam removal. One is safety, safety concerns, ongoing maintenance costs, improved and increased recreational opportunities, as well as increased ecological and biological benefits of removing the dam. So those are the four main reasons. And we talked with a lot of people that live in Troy and Piqua, talked to the citizens, talked to Troy officials, Miami Conservancy District officials, and the general consensus and the overwhelming majority of those people wanted the dam removed. Next question is, how wide was the river with dam removal just shown as compared to now? I believe you're referencing the one in Miami. So that backwater pool before the dam was removed, again, if we're talking generally, I believe it was about 250 to 300 feet wide. And then after it's removed, again, the river is going to fluctuate based on the time of year and the conditions, how wet it's been recently, etc. But I believe in that picture it was probably about 60 to 75 feet wide. So it is narrower, but there's still a significant amount of water that's able to flow through there. In fact, just right after the dam was removed, there was a small recreational outfitter that led a kayaking group through the dam removal area. Next question. The rendering of the dam you removed is a perfect idealization. Why is it perfect as soon as the dam is gone? So the dam removal image that I showed, obviously vegetation doesn't grow in right away. But the idea is as you move the dam, there's moving water. People want to recreate in those areas. Even so, we've seen an increased amount of people with their families down by the water and in the water, playing, fishing, etc. Next question. So removing the W weir structures or placing them at Treasure Islands, we're essentially moving the backwater. So with these W weir structures, they will not dam any more water than there is today. They will be designed and placed at the elevation that will maintain the existing water levels, not increase them or decrease them. So they're built to kind of maintain what's existing and not create more of a dam situation or lengthen that backwater dam. Another question, didn't Troy recently, within the last year, have a dam rescue when some young kids got trapped by or in the water? Yes, I believe that is true. I believe there was two kids or teenagers involved. Fortunately, they were rescued. Unfortunately, I know that just here in the last month, there was a few deaths. I believe it was on the Great Miami River, or is in Western Ohio, where some people were not as fortunate.
Yeah, Dave, that was Sydney.
Sydney, okay.
Two dams north of the current dam we're talking about, or I guess 3 dams. That structure that occurred on was a sheet pile dam, approximately half the height of the Troy Dam. And you know, if you go by that in low flow, that's the dangerous aspect of these dams. If you go by those in low flow, in a lot of cases, in most of that face of that dam, you won't have the hydraulic forming, but just as little as a couple tenths of an inch of rain, and that hydraulic forms at the base of these dams, and it becomes deadly. And unfortunately, 2 of the 4 paddlers on the Sydney Dam were not able to be rescued before they passed. So then I guess, well, Dave, I was going to type in a question or an answer, but it seemed to not let me do that. The next question I did see was somebody that asked about the sediment test report.
Yes.
And yeah, that's completed. We can work to get that available to the public, to any of those folks that are interested in seeing that report.
Yeah, we can get that information made available, and it'll also be part of our final report, which we put together. We'll be putting together for the cities of Troy and Piqua, and that whole report should be available to the public as well. Next question: what, if any, are we gaining or losing in flood capacity in Troy by altering the south side walls and adding bike paths, etc.? So there. As part of our coordination, we have been working with the Miami Conservancy District on what we are proposing, what we are recommending. No hydraulic models have been run to show, what that increase or decrease would be. However, when we had discussions with the city of Troy and the MCD expressed no concern about creating a bike path on the west side of the river, and expressed no concern that that would cause any harm or ability for the kind of levees that have been built to hold back or maintain, withstand floodwaters. So the MCD is fully supportive of this project, and nothing that we've presented is of concern to them. Donnie, and the next question is for you.
Okay.
You mentioned a 2-year planning phase to have the final design plans. How long is the actual construction removal phase? And then how long does it generally take to gain the vegetation on the increased banks as you're showing in the renderings?
Yep. Okay. Good question. So the OEPA money is 2-year money. So we are currently in year 1 activities. So from now until the end of October, we will begin drafting management and restoration plans with detailed budgets of how that $4 million is broken out between the various projects that I showed. And so as soon as is possibly by this fall, we could see some portions of the project occurring. The dam removal itself is typically can be done. We have, obviously, due to river levels, there's certain times of the year that we just simply can't get on the river. So a lot of times that work will begin late summer, early fall, and it'll go through to completion. It typically, the dam removals won't take more than a couple months. Once the elevation, the pool elevation, has changed to where it's going to be during its low flow periods, there'll be a combination of both revegetating with seeds and plants, as well as the seed bank will have already dispersed a lot of vegetation, different plant types. So now with if you noticed in the renderings, we didn't show, when we looked at both Troy and Piqua, we aren't showing large hardwood trees indicative of a floodplain area. And that's simply due to the restrictions of this stretch of river with Miami Conservancy District. We can't plant large trees that could potentially hold back and catch vegetation and increase flood damage. So a lot of it will be flowering plants, grasses, sedges, and rushes. And that typically for this whole project, typically the river itself, the sediment transport and things, you're looking at about a 3-year turnaround for the sediments to move, revegetation to be complete, and what have you. So If that
Yep.
helps. Go ahead. Yep.
That does. Thank you. And then, Donnie, I'm going to ask you have you answer the next question too, which was, what will the Oxbow Miami Shores Golf Course do for the homes on the north side of the Oxbow, historically in high flood areas? And yeah.
Hmm.
Was my question too nebulous?
No, I think he didn't know he muted himself. But the short answer is kind of opening up access for the river to the Oxbow will not affect the flood levels on that side.
I'm sorry, Dave. I didn't realize I was muted.
You're fine.
Okay, so yeah, I can tackle that again.
Yep.
We are working directly with Miami Conservancy District on some of the models that they've produced, and we're going to run those hydraulic models, and essentially flood stage in these areas, even with the off-channel wetlands. Your big events are going to be your big events. You're not going to change in a couple projects the overall flood capacity during flood stage. The idea with the Troy Oxbow is to allow, you've got a pinch point in Troy, the Miami Conservancy District has indicated, and that's the railroad bridge. And then just behind that railroad bridge is the earthen berm that the Miami Shores Golf Course Road is on. So what we can do is help get that water downriver in a safe way. Flood capacity in that particular project, it's one project and many that we can do to start pulling that flood damage down. So the Oxbow itself, the way that'll be designed is the water's going to back in like it does currently to about 80% of that flood, that off channel or side channel, 80% capacity, and then you'll start having water push through. And that's going to essentially help maintain sediment transport through there. Because right now it just backs in and it stops and all the sediment falls out, and you don't get that occasional flushing. So, and just so folks are aware, part of the permitting process for projects like these will include the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have to be able to show that we will not increase flood potential with this. So in the case of like the floodplain bench, more than likely you'll see material excavated out. Hopefully, if whatever material we can utilize that's right there on the opposite side of the river, we'll try to do that, but there'll be material taken out of the floodplain to make sure we, at a minimum, keep the existing flood capacity as it is now.
Thanks, Donnie. Donnie, I got one more question for you. So as part of the projects, will there be grasses and plantings installed along the riverbanks?
Yep. So there'll be, like I said, because of the levee system that we're sitting in on these projects, we're not going to be able to do. Typically, we would follow up with planting, shrub, things like that. For the most part, what we're going to see in this restoration is flowering plants, grasses that are indicative of floodplain areas. So it'll primarily be grasses, sedges, things like that. But we will have the ability to some diverse mixes with some flowers as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. And to add to that, the reason you didn't see that in the Muncie, the photo from Muncie after the dam removal, is twofold. One, because the White River through Muncie is a bedrock controlled stream. So there's just not a lot of organic material for plants to grow up right there next to the river. As well as that was not included in the funding for the overall project. So even if there was a little money for that, getting that material to grow there would be very difficult. So. Alrighty, are there any other questions about this project or the feasibility? Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
I had a chance to look at Treasure Island this week, and again, it's the lagoon essentially was man-made originally. I mean, it's not part of the natural part of the river. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So could we, I mean, you're essentially tearing down one dam and building one, and it sounds like we may need to build two of these wear walls or whatever you call them, W wears or whatever you call them. And so what would be if we filled in the lagoon and moved all the boating to the river's edge, could we see some other development ideas on what might be what we could do with that created green space by filling in the lagoon?
So we certainly could. That wasn't captured in this feasibility study in terms of an option. It certainly is an option from a restoration standpoint, but currently we didn't look at that option of filling in the lagoon just because that we didn't at that time have that interest, I guess. So it's something that could certainly happen, even if it were to happen later down the road. It could work in conjunction with the restoration options that we have and we've presented here in these first 4 public forums.
Right.
So yeah, it's certainly not impossible. It would just, that would open up a new discussion on a new phase of the project. And much like the restoration options we've presented, we would just need to gauge, what percentage of the community would like that idea, and then we can look at it. So there are these rivers. Go ahead.
Well, again, I say if we're moving rocks around, I mean, we've got to put rocks in the river to build a new dam, build those other areas. So, I mean, you can put the rocks and put them in the lagoon. I mean, it doesn't, But I'd like to see some other ideas on that, because again, I think by creating more green space in the Treasure Island area, I think we could utilize. I mean, if you bring out possibilities of having as an example, having the restaurant there now have a patio area on the lower level, and I mean, there's all sorts of things that could happen there that we where we could utilize that green space and and still have the boating capabilities that we do now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know if you noticed, but Bill, our president, had to jump off. So as the pro tem, I had to step in. Jeff, to your point, the study has some parameters, and that is outside those parameters. So we're having to deal primarily with the issues that Donnie and Dave are talking about here. So any other ideas on the outside of that will have to be discussions down the road.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, it is certainly, as this project or this restoration project continues down the road, I know Piqua has, for an example, Piqua has interest in maybe adding some more of the rock structures at a later time. That is possible. It just takes, we would have to have all the modeling and design work completed, and look at, from a regulatory standpoint, just look at what options are there. So it's certainly not impossible. It just like Bobby mentioned, it's not part of this study. So And Dave, if you want, I saw another new question.
Yep.
Let me pull that up real quick. So the total budget for all considered removals, and are the in-stream structures included? So yes, in short, yes, all the options that have been presented in the renderings today by Dave are part of that nomination. So we, typically about $350,000 is probably going to be in each of those removals, and that's just a rough estimate based on dams of similar size. But then from there, we have more than enough money to complete what we've presented right now. In Troy's case, something that would have to come beyond what we are doing with the EPA money, the building of the bench is going to create, it's going to pull that river level off of the concrete wall that's currently there on the levee, and it's going to provide better stability on that section of stream, and it's going to provide fish and wildlife habitat in the river itself compared to how it is now. So the building of the bench is covered in that, the dam removal is covered, and as well as the in-stream structures would be covered. What wouldn't be covered, and something that we are in discussions, is soon, the closer we get to this potentially becoming a reality, we would reconnect with the Ohio Department of Transportation. They possibly have some grant to do some bridge improvements for the State Route 55 bridge, Market Street Bridge, I guess you could call it, and as well as the connector paths. So we've had ODOT in some of our discussions, and we'll probably revisit that potential funding source to do things above and beyond the river restoration, where you get more into pedestrian traffic and access benches. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Donnie.
Yep.
All right. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we thank you for listening and watching our presentation. And as always, if you have more questions later today, tomorrow, next week, don't hesitate to reach out to Donnie or I, and we'd be happy to answer those. So with that, Patrick, I'm going to hand hosting capabilities back over to you.
Great, thank you.
And do you need us for anything else?
No, I don't, Mr. Phillips.
Dave and Donnie, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm sure that we'll probably be talking very soon about some other ideas on this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So before we get off of this topic, Mr. Phillips, just a couple of notes. The lagoon discussion is something that recently came up, not necessarily something that we are moving in that particular direction. It is something that would be a long-term discussion. The council action, I'm not sure if that was mentioned or not earlier, but official action, my understanding, and we'll give you more details as we know, is in the October timeframe is when council would be asked to pass some legislation related to easements. So that would be the kind of the official action by the council related to this project. So there is time. If there are any other questions in the meantime, please ask those. Please email me or reach out to me. And that's all I have on that work session item.
Yeah, and Patrick, to follow up with that, just so folks know, the money that the portions of all the projects that OEPA would be funding would need to have an environmental covenant placed on that. So that's a year one activity, and we'll start working directly with Troy if they have a legal team that would like to start that process with not only our help, but with Ohio EPA's help, we'll start looking at some of that language. And just so you're aware, only the parcels indicated on these maps that Troy owns would be what Troy needs to sign off on. The rest would be a good portion of these environmental covenants are going to fall in Miami Conservancy District lands. So essentially the environmental covenant for Troy would primarily be just dealing with the low dam, that portion of the removal. So
Thank you. All right.
All right, then. So we're going to move along to number 2. Is that?
Sure. Yeah, this is just a quick question. On Friday or even Saturday, I'm not even sure now, received a copy of a resolution that a neighboring community in Mason passed, and it was encouraging the governor to speed up the reopening of the state and wholly open the economy. Theirs was more focused on the tourism side of things. If there's interest in us doing that or presenting one for discussion and action next Monday, please let me know. And since this is a work session and this is where we just kind of discuss these things as a sounding board, the concerns continue to be that the rollout or the recovery continues to be rather sporadic and slow moving, and in some respects even contradictory. We are just wondering if the council wants to see them just roll everything out so that we can get rid of the inconsistencies and we can understand as a community, not only municipally, but also from the business community, that we are back open for business, so that we don't have to try to continue to interpret the rules as to how many people can be in the pool and who can dance and who can't, and what's a reception and what's a free speech activity and what's a grad party, and what you can and can't do. We have had a great working relationship, an outstanding working relationship with the Miami County Health folks who are trying to help us navigate this. And frankly, not to put words in their mouth, but there are many times when they are just as confused as we are. And so this resolution would just encourage them to move a little faster and just get it over with as we get closer to July 4th. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No problem.
2 points. Number 1, this is a non-binding resolution.
It's just yeah, that's correct.
A request.
Yep.
And number 2, what are the ramifications of declaring the entire city all essential?
Other communities have considered doing that. And of course, none of this is binding on us. It would be up to Mr. Kerber to advise us legally. But our understanding is the other legal counsels of the community or communities that have done it have indicated that there's really no legal force behind it, and that the statewide emergency measures would trump that. That, of course, is always open to interpretation, and that interpretation would be decided ultimately by the court system. Not sure that we want to go that route, but in this case, if we did a non-binding resolution, it would just be letting them know how we feel, if in fact that's the way we feel.
Gotcha. Any other questions from councilman? Concerns? Okay. All right. Can we move along then to our regular committees?
So is that saying that we want to see this on the agenda for next week or not?
No.
I would say yes, but I want to read it first, and I want to know what it says on, because I read the Warren County one, and it was really explicit as to primarily tourism. So if we're looking at economic opening downtown, I guess that's what I want to know, what the purpose of the resolution is going to be to open up, as it looks like things are opening up right now pretty. I mean, are you looking like the 4th of July, the brass, the concert? Is that what you're looking to accomplish?
Well, we're looking to accomplish just, if it's the council's will, to just open up as quickly as possible to get rid of, or at least clarify the parameters. And there's really no set deadline. It's just, get to it and get it done. We don't have any dates on it. Mr. Sieber, what we would strike everything that is related to Warren County, and we would keep it the more general whereases. But I can certainly do a draft, pass a draft around. I would ask that if you have comments that you send them to me individually, because we are, this would be open for discussion at the council meeting, not before then. And we did receive it quite late, so we were not able to fashion a draft that's specific to Troy.
So this would be on par with like what Jana Powell sent over, to simply say this is what our citizens want, and we want it to be open. We want things to be moving forward, and we want you to consider those issues and the impact they've had financially upon our community and our citizens.
Yes, without being heavy-handed or too strong in our language, correct?
I would have I don't have a problem.
Is it a majority opinion then that we go ahead and get the draft resolution from staff and leave it open to discussion at the next council meeting?
I just asked before we do that, do we know of any other localities that have done this other than Warren County?
I can find out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I will find that out. I've heard anecdotally that it's happened across the state. I think there have been maybe one or more in central and northern Ohio, but don't quote me on that. I will check into it.
I would just want to see that and any comments from the public health department as part of the discussion.
One thing to remember here, this COVID thing is not over. And if you follow what our health department has been publishing, our infection rate is starting to go back up again. And so I think when you look at Ohio versus some other states, what you see is that Ohio has probably some of the lowest infection rates and the lowest death rates of any of the states that are our size. And I think you have to compliment Governor DeWine and the doctor on this, because again, it's, they have our best interest at heart. And I would feel more comfortable allowing them to make those decisions as they see and monitor the numbers and the cases and how we're handling this thing. But to just to go back open everything up is all it's going to do is create another shutdown.
I don't know that we want to get into a debate on that, other than,
well, when are we going to discuss it? Or you want to do? I mean, we can do it now. We can do it at the council meeting, but it's got to be discussed.
Well, we don't know exactly what we're discussing at the moment without seeing what the staff is recommending or coming from the mayor's office with the resolution.
yeah, and the Mr. Schilling, my point is that I'm not sure that there's universal belief in what you're saying about the decisions that have been made and the science versus the modeling and some of the assumptions that have been made. There's a lot of different opinions out there. All this is saying is that, and I don't even know that there's universal agreement that our rate of infection and or deaths and or any of the other statistics are any better than the national average. And if there's just a lot of statistics out there, but there's also a lot of modeling that has been proven to be a moving target. So that's what I'm saying. I don't really want to debate it because, you can get 10 people in a room and they have 10 different opinions about it. The draft resolution would not go to that level of detail because, again, there's so many different opinions on it. What is known is that we continue to monitor very closely the economic impact of the total shutdown of the Ohio economy. And if we disagree on everything else, I think we have to agree that there has been a lot of economic impact negatively from this. And as things are rolling out, the administration will agree that some decisions and parameters may conflict with other sections of orders that are pre-existing or that are sent out at the same time. And so until we have some clarity, until we have some better understanding, and until we just get on with things, it's difficult to manage during this. It really is. As it is, we're not sure what the impact of our shutoffs and lack of shutoffs are until we finally get some resolution there. We won't know what our true income tax impact is realistically for another couple of months, possibly as late as waiting until after the July 15th filing deadline to understand, because we always see a spike in income tax receipts when we get close to the actual deadline. These are the kind of things that have played into this whole situation and whole scenario, and it's making it very difficult. It is, we're in June. In another month or two, we're going to start trying to plan for next year's budget. And we want to do that based on as good information as we can and to start the rollback out of this economy and get people comfortable coming out of their homes and starting to be active participants in the economy is the only way we're going to understand, number one, what that true impact is going to be, and number two, how long that impact is going to last. So that's the only reason that I bring this resolution up. Again, it's not going to be quote unquote in your face. It's not going to be negative in any way. It's not going to question the decisions that were made, why they were made, and on what basis. It's just merely asking that, hey, can we go a little faster in getting things back open?
Gotcha. Thank you. Any other concerns, questions on that item? And so once again, we're going to, when do you think the draft resolution will be done, Patrick?
We'll try to get it done tomorrow.
Gotcha. All right, and then leave that for open discussion at council meeting on Monday. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move along to the Community and Economic Development Committee, which is Mrs. Snee, Mr. Rosella, Mr. Twist, and Mrs. Snee, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is a meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee, and it is June 8th at approximately 6:15 p.m. We are meeting tonight to provide a recommendation to council regarding ordinance 28 or 028-2020, which is rezoning a parcel at 430 Kirk Lane from R4 to OC1. Mr. Titterington, do you have information? about
Thank you,
this?
Mrs. Snee. As you mentioned, this is a request to rezone from R4 to OC1 on Kirk Lane. That is right behind the second property off of Market Street to the east of the corner property. The Rays?
Yes.
On a blank, yeah. Automotive, it's right next to it. It's the old, I believe it was an old daycare for a while. Kindercare, thank you. And they are requesting that it go to OC1. It was approved by Planning Commission unanimously, and there was a council public hearing at your last council meeting. And we are recommending that council approve it.
And I just had one question. We had an email from someone who had a comment negatively at that public hearing that they submitted ahead of time. Were their questions answered? Or, I mean, I know it didn't really get addressed at the public hearing.
I provided him a copy of what was shown. I provided him a copy of what we had as the parking plan because that was one
That was his
issue
question.
he was interested in. I did not receive a comment back.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other committee members who have questions about this? Any other council members with questions? If not, then committee members, is your recommendation to move forward?
Move forward.
Move forward.
All right, then the committee
Move forward.
unanimously recommends to move forward with this item.
Okay,
Are there any other items to come before this committee?
No, ma'am.
If not, we're adjourned.
Next on the item, we have Community Partnerships Committee with Mr. Rozell as chair, Mr. Allen, Mr. Schweizer. And Mr. Rozell, the screen is yours.
Thank you. We're meeting at 6:19 via Zoom, and we're asked to consider an agreement for an event to be held down July 3rd, 2020 on the square involving the Pink Ribbon Girls, which involves using public property in the sale of alcohol beverages. Any further details on that, Patrick? This is an annual event, isn't it?
No, this is actually not the annual event. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request that was made to, as kind of part of our rollout. And this is where some of the confusion comes into play. We have July 4th weekend. We have a concert on July 4th down at Treasure Island, along with the fireworks that we are planning on implementing. And we are working with Miami County Health to do that safely. However, by July 3rd, who knows what rules will be in effect, if any. As of right now, I will say that, so what they are planning on doing, Mr. Rozell and committee, is similar to what Pink Ribbon Girls has done the last two late summer, early fall events. This would have there'd be a closed venue. There would be several bands playing one after another on Prouty Plaza and possibly on smaller stages in a couple of the quads. They do request to sell alcohol. That would be supplied by our local brewery and Mollers. So we are asking for a notwithstanding ordinance. It came up fairly quickly. I will tell you that this is subject to the Ohio Liquor Control granting a temporary permit. This is one of those things that we're in limbo on because with the governor's orders being the way they are not issuing temporary permits at this point. But as things are changing, so will they. And so this is, your granting of this is subject to them receiving a temporary liquor permit for that day. they don't receive it. This event doesn't go on, and we concentrate only on July 4th, which will not have alcohol at Treasure Island.
So what you're saying is everything downtown on the 3rd is canceled, is pending on their liquor license approval?
Correct.
Okay.
And since time is of the essence, because
Emergency
there's a
legislation.
30-day window, we are asking for emergency legislation.
Committee,
Sounds good
Yeah.
to me.
Is there going to be music downtown with that? I mean, what are they planning?
Yes, there would be a series of bands, 3 maybe, that would be playing either back to back or, well, they would be back to back with intermissions, starting at 11 or 12 o'clock in the morning and ending, I believe, 9 o'clock at night. Oh, 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock in the evening. I will also say that part of this, July 3rd is the first Friday of the month. And so there would be cross promotions with the Troy Main Street, who wants to do their first non-virtual first Friday of the year. I believe it's of the year.
And then there would be food trucks and things like that downtown, or?
They're working on that, yes.
Okay.
They are. Another option that they've been talking about is offering that opportunity to the businesses within that area to just sell convenient food and using the sidewalks, since it would be blocked off.
Okay. I like it.
but what you're saying is they're only doing that if they get their liquor license.
Correct. I mean, the whole thing hinges on that.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Recommendation from the committee?
Proceed.
Move forward. Emergency legislation.
Unanimously, emergency legislation forward.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else?
No, sir.
All righty. We are adjourned.
Next up on our agenda is the Finance Committee, and that is Mr. Schweizer, Mr. Siebert, and myself. Mr. Siebert, you have the con.
Nope.
Excuse me, Mr. Schweizer, you have the con.
There you go. Good afternoon. It is 6:25 on June 8th, 2020, and this is a meeting of the Finance Committee. With me on screen are Mr. Phillips and Mr. Siebert, and we are here to talk about refinancing some of our bonds. Mr. Titterington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 2 series of bonds from 2014 and 2015. In reviewing it with our bond counsel and our underwriter, specifically our underwriter analyzed the bonds that we have outstanding and has recommended that we refinance those 2 series because given this environment, by refinancing, their estimate is that we can save over $1 million over the next 20-year life that's remaining on those 2 particular series. Mr. Frigge, who is not here, he has been in those discussions with me. He is in 100% agreement that we should do this. And we are, as this is bonds and bond sale, and there's a window of time that we have a lot of preparation to do, including preparing a presentation to get an updated bond rating from our one of the 2 rating agencies. We are asking for consideration of emergency legislation.
Okay. How many bonds are we going to combine some bonds into one?
No, these are already combined. I don't think that the 14 and 15 can be combined, just given the timing. But those years worth of bonds encapsulates several different projects. So when they were first borrowed, there were several projects that were borrowed in the same series.
Okay. Now we have a couple that are going to sunset in 2023 and 24. Are we including those? Are we going to let those?
No, those will expire. There's no value to refinancing. There are always some set costs when it comes to refinancing anything, issuance costs, legislative costs, legal costs, etc. Not your legislative costs, but just preparing all the paperwork and going out to market. And those are within a few years of, I'd say expiring, but maturing or disappearing, if you will, being paid off. And so there's no value to doing that.
Okay. Mr. Phillips, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Sieber?
No, I did speak to John Friggy today, and he said that he thinks it would be about a $1.1 million savings by doing this, depending on the actual date when the refinancing occurs. But he did strongly encourage us to do that as well.
Okay.
To do this as well.
Anybody, any other councilman? Mr. Phillips, Mr. Siebert, are you good with emergency legislation on this?
Yes.
Yes.
I am too.
Thank you.
We'll move forward with that.
Great.
Anything else to come before finance?
Actually, yes, sir, there is. Before you close up, sorry. This is another one that we received. So this week appears to be the last week of state legislative action before they go into recess. As a matter of fact, there may be some aspects that are already in recess. But one of the pieces of legislation that they are still considering, it is now in conference committee between the Senate and the House, is HB 310, which would provide the mechanism through which the state will be able to disperse a portion of the $1.2 billion that it has received that goes to non-entitlement counties and to the state through the CARES Act, the Federal CARES Act. Now, they are going to use a formula that is the same as what is used for our local government fund. Now, having said that, there is no guarantee that we would get 1 cent of that money, because the federal government requirement is that is reimbursable funding and spending that we have made in response to the COVID-19 issue. So we have to justify that. We have to be able to document all related expenses. When we do that, then we will send it to, I believe it'll be the county EMA, who will then verify it through the state. The state will then cut us a reimbursement check up to, but not to exceed, the amount calculated, again, based on the local government fund. We are working on that. We do have some expenses that we feel are eligible, but one of the requirements, and it's a requirement that has to be done fairly quickly, is a resolution that establishes the protocols and specifically agrees to following the protocols of the state and the federal government. That is, if you will, enabling legislation that allows us to submit for those reimbursements. And so we are asking for a positive recommendation to the council to do that as an emergency, so that we can get it in place prior to submitting, because we only have a window of time. And as soon as the bill is reconciled between the conference committee, then we'll be able to start submitting for reimbursements.
Okay. Mr. Phillips, Mr. Siebert, any questions?
No.
None.
I have none either. You wish to proceed?
Please.
Emergency's good?
Yes.
Let's proceed with emergency legislation on that as well.
All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Anything else to come before finance?
No, sir.
All right, very good. We are adjourned.
Next up, we have the Recreation Park Committee and Mr. Schilling, Mr. Twilliger, and myself. And Mr. Schilling, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is the meeting of the Recreation and Parks Committee. It is at 6:32 on June 8th. And we are via Zoom attending as Mr. Twilliger and Mr. Phillips. And before us is a policy guideline regarding declaring city property as surplus. There's a recommendation that the council approve policy guidelines regarding declaring city real property as surplus. Anything to add, Mr. Kitterington?
Just that this policy comes with a unanimous recommendation from the park board at their June 2nd park board meeting. They did pass this on to the council. It does incorporate their input and substantially, I guess, the input of the administration and what else? So they are, I think I mentioned at Monday night's council meeting, you have the policy here. They have been doing an investigation. We are almost done with the surveying of the park properties to see if any encroachments exist beyond the boundaries of ours and the park lands. I will also note that this policy is a policy that would work for, are good guidelines for not just park controlled land, but also any other city land that the council may on its own want to declare surplus, regardless of whether it has park board input or not.
Okay, I have a question for you, Mr. Kitterington. As we deal with these encroachments, this type of thing, would the administration feel comfortable in working with these people that have encroachment problems, and administratively giving them a letter or something saying that we recognize the encroachment and but right now we're not really concerned about it, and that we can, if we need the land, we have the ability to take it back versus selling all these little pieces and parts of the park. Pardon?
Yeah, there's
we have something like that in place now.
Well, that's really, oh, something happened. That is, it is something that we have the flexibility to do now. We've talked internally about that. And so there's no predisposition to sell any property just because there's an encroachment. That is not an automatic conclusion. It really depends on the type of encroachment. We may have an encroachment where we simply send a letter to the property owner and say, you need to relocate this fence back 6 feet because you're over the line. So it doesn't automatically mean that we're going to come to council, or that in the case of park property, the park board comes to the council with a recommendation to declare surplus. Each one would be a case-by-case basis. It does not appear that there are many of those. Where it comes to those types of encroachments that maybe they're, what do we call it? Botanical, where maybe it's just a garden. We would certainly want to send a letter acknowledging that we know about the encroachment and that, it's okay until we need that land, and just kind of put them on notice without being disruptive. So it'll really depend on what the encroachment looks like, and everyone will be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out some way to, I mean, we've got a lineup of people that want to buy land. And of course, with council's last decision, if I were a property owner bordering up to Archer Park, I'd jump in and say, hey, I want to buy some land too. So I'm just wondering if there's another way that we could deal with this where we don't have to be, essentially, looking at this every couple of 3 months to, should we or should we not sell parkland? So that,
and we haven't had that many, believe it or not. Lately, there's been a kind of a mini rush, if you will. Mr. Carnum started that ball rolling, and of course, Mrs. Schaefer had the most recent one. We do have a request by a neighbor that would like to buy that property, behind her along Archer. And then we have a general request by the park board to sell Waco Park, but that's not related to any particular property owner. Other than that, it does not happen that frequently. I know it seems like it has recently, but this one's been kind of dragging on a long time.
Okay.
Patrick, Jeff, I have a question.
Yes.
But we're not expecting that there's a large amount of encroachment issues. We're expecting that to be a smaller number, correct?
That's correct. That's what we think. We're just verifying a couple of other properties.
Okay, thanks.
Within what we were asked to do, we asked that they develop policy guidelines. The park board has done that. By doing that, they then give the administrative team guidelines to deal with this. So I'm in favor of accepting this recommendation and moving on.
Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, the staff recommendation is fine with me.
Okay, you both think that this would be a tool that we could use in making decisions in the future?
We don't.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and proceed with this, and I think it sounds like we're all in favor of it.
And we are not recommending or requesting emergency legislation, so we're good there.
Right.
All right.
Is there any other business before the committee?
No, there is not.
Okay. Then we are done. We're dismissed.
Okay.
Not totally.
No.
Last but not least, we have the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, which is Mr. Schilling, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair. And this is the 8th of June at 6:40 p.m. And again, we're meeting on Zoom. And the staff report, excuse me, is looking for an ODOT, or for our recommendation on ODOT LPA project agreement along South Market Street. And Mr. Titterington, are you presenting the staff report on that?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, there are two similar reports. These are two projects, ODOT local project agreements. The first one is on South Market Street. We have budgeted a signal timing analysis study of the stoplights from Water Street south to, I believe, well, around the corner onto to Grant at West Market. We have since learned that ODOT is interested in funding that project, and to use safety funds, they require, as usual, a project agreement with the city. This is a request for emergency legislation, which is the case with all ODOT projects. So it's a good thing for us. We were planning on doing it, but now ODOT is willing to pay for the study.
Are they actually going to do the study? Or are we going to go ahead and do it and get reimbursed for it?
We will do this, and they will have input into it.
Okay. Any other questions from Mrs. Snee or Mr. Schilling? Any other council folks have questions? And that, again, this is consideration for emergency legislation. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Fellow committee members, what is your pleasure with this item?
I think we should proceed.
Move forward with emergency.
Thanks. It is unanimous with the committee to move forward as staff is recommending, and hopefully the state is paying for. Any other items to come? Oops, we have one more.
Yeah,
item.
we do have the one other one. It's a similar project. It's an ODOT project agreement. This is the project at West Main Street and Kings Chapel Drive. We budgeted $250,000 for that stoplight out there. ODOT has again stepped in. They have safety money to do this project. We will be required to pay for the engineering. So instead of $250,000, we think it's going to be less than $50,000 to do that part of the work. That's engineering, design, etc. Again, we would do that project, and ODOT would have input since it is on, particularly since it's on State Route 41. And we are requesting emergency legislation with this one as well.
I'm just so in awe of the state of Ohio with their checkbook. I don't have any questions, Mrs. Snee or Mr. Schilling.
No.
Any other council folks with questions or comments on this item? And Mrs. Snee, Mr. Schilling, what is your pleasure with this item?
Move forward with emergency.
Agreed.
Okay. It is unanimous with the committee that we're going to recommend or follow the recommendation of staff as outlined above. Any other items to come before the Streets and Sidewalks Committee?
No, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure dealing with all of you and having you aboard, and we are adjourned for the evening.
Good night.